vaccine, which is a very nice story, and it does everything we hope our vaccines would do with herd immunity and so on. I'm afraid talking about malaria vaccines is much more complicated because we don't have that sort of vaccine yet. So what I'm going to try to do in this talk, and Matt will follow on with me, we cover slightly different aspects of the same thing, is talking about how we use an imperfect vaccine. And maybe this has some relevance as well when we're thinking about HIV vaccines and TB vaccines, which it's unlikely we're going to come up in the very near future with vaccines of the sort of efficacy and impact that we've seen for rotavirus. This is, I'm taking sort of as my endpoint the clinical malaria, so this is a sort of a more epidemiological talk than some of the others that we've heard. But I mean, malaria does have a lot of externalities, and maybe we might discuss that a little bit in the discussion group. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm really sort of focusing on how we use the vaccine to prevent clinical attacks of malaria. I think many of you will know that there's been a lot of progress in malaria control, and I think this slide shows what's happened. Despite an increase in the population, which we sometimes forget, which has almost doubled, the actual number of clinical attacks of malaria has gone down by about 37%, I think, and an even bigger increase in deaths. And if you look out next week, there'll be another World Malaria Report is coming out. I suspect that the line there has gone down even further a little bit. But if it's the half glass, half full, there are still nearly 500,000 deaths from malaria every year. And most of those deaths are in young children in Africa. And that's in spite of an enormous effort, $2 billion being spent on malaria control. People have done really well in scaling up the interventions that we have, like bed nets, effective treatment. So I think everybody really agrees that in the hard to manage areas, we need some new tools, and one of those may well be a malaria vaccine. So this is the sort of malaria, if we're writing a TPP for the company, this is what we would ask for. Malaria vaccine, 90% efficacy, sustained protection, effective against all strains, because there is variation in the parasite. I mean, one vaccine may work against one strain and not another. Very safe. You could introduce it into the EPI, and that was what was hoped would happen with RTSS, and produced at an affordable cost. And if that happened, and we do have another vaccine I've been working with, the meningitis A vaccine, probably fulfills most of those criteria. And then if that happens, we wouldn't be having a discussion like we're going to have today. I mean, you just introduce it into all the areas where malaria is a significant clinical burden. And that's what's happened with the MEN-A vaccine. It's been rolled out across 300 million people because it's a very effective vaccine. So I think that's not going to happen in my lifetime, that we're going to have a vaccine like that. How long? Maybe one day we will, but it's certainly a long way away. And we're going to end up with less perfect vaccines that we have to work with. And the sort of international group came together, and they did this about 20 years ago, came up with a target for 2020. We now have a target for 2030. And now what they're asking for is that we have 75% efficacy for 1 or 2 years. But interestingly, added in this extra bit that we also need a vaccine that is going to basically have a herd effect by stopping transmission. So this is probably a realistic goal for 2030. But we're not there yet. So we have 2 vaccines that are quite close to being used, and I'm going to talk about those just for those who are not familiar with malaria and malaria vaccines. This is the life cycle, and we have 3 groups of vaccines. The ones that are targeting the sporozoite, the stage of the parasite that's injected by the mosquito. Those that are targeting the blood stage as the parasite circulating in the blood. And this is what the roadmap is asking us to do, to develop vaccines that will stop transmission by attacking the parasite in the mosquito or in the sexual stages in the blood. And the 2 most advanced ones we've got are both pre-erythrocytic vaccines directed against the sporozoite. And that's a good target because the mosquito only injects about 10 to 100 sporozoites when it bites somebody, so that the numbers are relatively small. Once you get to the blood stages, each cycle, you've got 10,000, hundreds of thousands of parasites coming out into the blood, so much more difficult. And this is a picture of the sporozoite. It's covered by this protein on the surface here, the circumsporozoite protein, which is shed into the fluid, and it's a really dominant protein. And the RTSS vaccine that we're talking about, the one that's most advanced, is made from this protein. It's most of it it's expressed in yeast, and together with hepatitis B antigen as well. And that goes into a virus-like particle, which is immunogenic, and it is given with a very powerful adjuvant. And it's had to really push the immune system as hard as you can in every way by using virus-like particles and a very strong adjuvant to get the level of antibodies that have given protection. This vaccine here, the sporozoite one, which is made by a company, Narian, led by Steve Hoffman, actually uses the whole sporozoite and it irradiates it. So it's still alive, but it doesn't multiply when it's in the body. And there's another group in Nijmegen who give live sporozoites, but they give people a drug, chloroquine, at the same time, and that stops the parasite. Once it's got into the blood, it doesn't multiply. So those are the two vaccines we're going to be talking about, PFSPZ and RTSS. And these are their properties. Matt will go into this a little bit more about RTSS, but just very quickly, I mean, they're getting high efficacy now with both vaccines, even higher than this actually when you use a fractional dose, and RTSS has given, SPZ has given 100% protection in some experiments. But for RTSS, the disappointing thing is that protection wanes very quickly, and over 4 years you only had about 30% protection in the young children. We don't know how long that one will last, but I suspect it's going to be relatively short-term as well. And these are some of the other issues related to RTSS, and Matt will go into a bit more. I mean, there are safety issues. We don't know how much it's going to cost. This vaccine you have to give intravenously rather than intramuscularly, and it doesn't work if you give it intramuscularly. That's a drawback, but actually that does not prove to be such a big drawback as we thought. So we've got two malaria vaccines. One has actually had a positive opinion from the European Union, and as David has said, is now going into large, I think we call them pilot implementation studies rather than phase 4 studies. The PFSPZ is getting pretty near to being used on a larger scale. So we really need to start thinking about how we are going to use best these imperfect vaccines. And I think these are some of the things we have to think about. I'm going to focus particularly on the sort of epidemiological characteristics, because malaria is not the same everywhere. It behaves in different ways in different places. But obviously we have to think about safety, the cost of in doing this as opposed to other interventions. As David has mentioned, maybe perhaps the effect when we add it in with other interventions, and the acceptability of vaccination. And so these are some of the ideas we've been thinking about RTSS, how we might use it. And I'll give some examples of this. Clearly what the burden of the disease is important, and we can talk about that. We have some data from that for RTSS. If you have a vaccine that only has a short duration of protection, then maybe it might be particularly useful in areas where malaria occurs only during a short period. And we might use it in elimination campaigns and in halting an epidemic. So these are away from the conventional idea that you just put it into the EPI program. I think that's not going to happen with RTSS. We have to think of other ways in which we might use this vaccine. And for these asterisk points here, we actually probably only need a vaccine that has a high efficacy but short duration of action. Long duration may not be so important for that, as would be the case if we were introducing it into the EPI. So this is some of the results from the big phase 3 trial of RTSS. This is efficacy here with percentage, that's 50% there. And this are the different sites where the vaccine was done, ranked by the level of transmission of malaria at that site. So we have Kilifi here on the coast of Kenya, very low transmission. Down here at Siaya on the Lake Victoria in Kenya, very, very high transmission. And you can see there's some suggestion that perhaps the efficacy is higher in the low transmission areas, is what you might expect. But actually, it's pretty good all the way through, and the confidence limits overlap. So it's somewhere around 30–40%, whatever the level of transmission. And that was a very important finding from that trial, because it might have actually just looked like that, with efficacy where you have little pressure, no efficacy in the high transmission areas. And perhaps this is my most important slide when we translate this into the disease prevented. So here you have the same site starting in Kilifi, the low transmission CI here at the end there, and this is the number of cases prevented by 1,000 people vaccinated. R3C, that's without a booster. This is the children who had a booster at 18 months. And it's pretty, I mean, it's not surprising, common sense would tell you this was the case, but if you vaccinate 1,000 children in CI, you prevent over that 4-year period 6,000 cases of malaria. If you did that in Kilifi, you would prevent 50. So I think this helps us in defining, in relation to the level of transmission, where this vaccine might be useful. And there's been cost-effective analysis, and Matt will talk a little bit about that, which has sort of taken that analysis a little bit further. So I think that's a really important point. We look at the intensity of the transmission and not just at efficacy. So in quite a lot of the parts of sub-Saharan Africa, it's about probably a third of the population, or in the belt, which is the meningitis belt, in the Sahel and the sub-Sahel, malaria is very seasonal because you just have a rainy season for a few months. And this is an area we're working in at the moment in Burkina Faso. These are the cases of malaria over a couple of years. And you can see that the vast majority of cases occur in a fairly short period. So it's a bit like a flu outbreak or RSV outbreak, with malaria coming as a seasonal disease. And so that led to the idea of interventions that were just focused on this period. And I'm going back to an old idea. We developed the idea of seasonal malaria chemoprevention, in which you give drugs to children under 5 just for these 3 or 4 months. So they come monthly, once a month, and get treatment with sulfadoxine, pyrimethamine, and amidaquine, and this is SMC, seasonal malaria chemoprevention. This is, we was not known whether you could actually implement this at scale, but that seems to be happening quite well. This was picked up by Unit Aid, who provided funding to do this, and I think this year 18 million children will probably get SMC. So that is using a tool that is directed specifically at an area where the epidemiology of the infection is seasonal. But there are problems to this. It's quite demanding. The mothers have to bring their children to get the treatment 4 times a year. If the treatment was given by dots, which some people do, it would be 12 times a year because the treatment is 3 days. The drugs that are being used for this are SP and amidaquine, which are old drugs. There's a real danger of resistance. And there are areas in southern and eastern Africa which do have seasonal malaria in the same way, but this can't be done because we don't have a drug to do that. So there is a real risk that this whole program could collapse because of resurgence of resistance. And there are no other drugs currently available, probably, that we could use that have the right properties. So we've had the idea of, well, could we do like we do with flu? Could we use malaria vaccines as a seasonal vaccine, without giving you protection just over that same period of a few months when malaria is really severe? And this is a trial that will start next year in Burkina Faso and Mali, which has 3 groups. The idea is the children will be primed with RTSS in this group. Then just before the rainy season starts, they get a booster dose. And we do, at the moment, we've got this plan to do for 2 years. But the idea, if it worked, would be you go on till the children were 5 or 10 each year, just giving a booster dose of vaccine. And we have another group here which is just getting RTSS, and then one that's just getting SMC. And so we're looking to see whether RTSS it would be as effective, non-inferior to SMC, but whether if we added them both together, we'd get a cost-effective, useful addition in control. And another idea that has been developed for using imperfect vaccines that give high efficacy for a short period of time is elimination. And Steve Hoffman and his group have been working with BIPC a group which has had a lot of funding over many years for Marathon Oil on this island of Bioko off the coast of West Africa. And the plan is somewhere around 2019, they will try and eliminate malaria on this island. It's about 250,000 people by vaccinating everybody at the same time. And to do that, you have to have a very safe vaccine because you're vaccinating lots and lots of people who have got very low risk of malaria. But if you really could do that, and you probably need to get 90% coverage with the vaccine, then you would stop transmission and achieve elimination. So that's another potential use of vaccines with high efficacy but low duration of protection. And another might be in stopping epidemics. And this is what happened in Sri Lanka. Some of you will have heard that Sri Lanka was approved this year as having eliminated malaria, a big achievement. And that's been a very long study, problem for them. Going back here in the 1960s, using DDT spraying, they very nearly eliminated malaria. They got down to 16 cases somewhere round about here. They withdrew some of the control measures, and back came malaria again with a vengeance. They had 1 million cases. And you just wonder if you'd had a vaccine then. You'd seen when somewhere like on Bioko or somewhere you started seeing cases coming up again, could you step in then with a vaccine and halt the appearance of an epidemic? And as malaria generally goes down, I think we're going to see more epidemics in areas which that hasn't happened previously. So, of course, I've focused on the epidemiology, targeting the vaccine to areas where the epidemiology makes the most use of its properties. But obviously, there's the cost-effectiveness analysis and the risks and so on, the things that we'd have with any vaccine that you're going to use. And if you're going to use vaccines for mass vaccination in areas where malaria is not currently a big problem, you have to have a very, very safe vaccine. And then, again, there is the issue of acceptability and the cost. And as we discussed yesterday, it's not just the health, but there are other things in the health budget. There are also other things that people are going to want to spend their money on. And these are probably not going to be very cheap vaccines, quite complicated to make. And again, another thing is really what the population thinks. And we had some interesting, Medicine for Malaria Venture has done some social science work on SMC, and one of the things that the mothers came up with in Burkina Faso and when they said, well, doctor, we really like this drug treatment, it's working really well, but why don't you just come with us with one injection, that would at the beginning of the rainy season, that would be much easier for us than bringing the children every day. So I think they got the message that this might be an approach that would be useful. So I think this is my conclusion. I'm trying to say that the first generation of vaccines are not likely to have limited efficacy, and we have to learn ways in which we can use them in a more imaginative way than just using it in the EPI to get the maximum benefit from that. And as I've said, I focus really on my public health benefit here is actually cases of malaria, but obviously because we know that the consequences of malaria on nutrition, education and so on and things, hopefully those will follow if we use the vaccine in the right way. So thank you. I think that's my last slide.